Hello, research students. I am going to film a video for you about measurement, and this is my first time using QuickTime this way, so keep your fingers crossed. Hope that this is going to work. I think a lot of times students feel like measurement in a social work research class is something they should already know how to do, right? We know how to measure things. We measure things all the time. So when we talk about measurement in social work research, we're going to use some terminology that might be a little bit new to you and talk about it in a slightly different way. We're really trying to figure out with the best that we can how to be sure that when we test our hypothesis or we try to answer our research question, that we're really looking at the variables that are important to us that we want to look at. So the first terminology that you're going to hear is levels of measurement. And this goes from, in order from, you'll see from the bottom to the top, so the lowest level of measurement to the highest, nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. I don't know a good way to memorize this other than just memorizing it, although I hear from some of my students that there's a song out there that does this, but I haven't found it yet. So nominal is the lowest level of measurement because a nominal level of measurement is just grouping things basically into categories. So think of nominal as just naming or putting things into buckets, right? So if I ask you what your favorite baseball team is, I have a bucket of Red Sox fans and a bucket of Yankees fans and a bucket of Mariners fans and a bucket of Cardinals fans. I'm not ranking those in any way. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying these are the groups that people fall into. So gender would fit into this category, race and ethnicity would fit into this category. So lots of things that we are interested in as social workers fall here. Ordinal is sort of the next step up. So I can put things in order, but I don't necessarily know the distance between the two or three things. So for example, if you think about looking at people who finish a race, right? I can tell you which runner came in first, second, and third. But just in looking at the order that they finished, I don't know if the first and second were really close. That was like a photo finish, and the second and third, it was a really long distance between them. So I know what order they're in, but I don't know sort of how close they are together. An interval level of measurement is the next step up from that. So I know what order they are, and the distance between them is meaningful. So if you think about, for example, finishing a race in 1 minute versus 2 minutes versus 3 minutes, right? I know the distance, minutes is a meaningful amount, and it's standard. And so that's what an interval level is. And ratio is where something that has an absolute zero. So if I'm measuring how many times a client came to visit their social worker, there can be a zero, and that zero means they've never come. That zero means something. And then 1 visit, 2 visits, 3 visits, right? All of those things are an equal distance apart. So these are the levels of measurement. This will come in handy when we talk about statistics later on in the program. You'll sort of find this as you look into your measurement instruments this week. This will be something that's helpful to understand. The next terminology we're going to use when we talk about measurement is reliability. And reliability is really just whether or not, if I use the same measure over and over again, would I get the same result? And so the best way I've always found to think about this is a scale. So if I step on a scale and every time I step on the scale I get the same answer, it's a reliable scale. If I step on the scale and I get a different answer every time, it's not reliable. Now, reliable is not the same thing as accurate, right? There's a clock in the classroom that I regularly teach in that will give you the same answer. Every day at noon, it will tell you it's 1:30. It's reliable. It's not accurate, though. And so reliability is not in and of itself proof that we have a good measurement instrument. Measurement validity, now this is the thing we're really trying to get at, right? Validity is whether the thing that we're using as our measurement instrument accurately measures the concept it's supposed to measure. So does the clock say noon when it's actually noon? Does the scale say the actual weight that you are? Are we really measuring the thing we want to measure? And measurement validity can fall into these 4 categories, and your textbook goes into them as well. So content validity is about whether or not my measurement instrument measures all of the aspects of the thing that I'm studying. That's a really complicated way to say, if I am creating a measurement instrument to study your knowledge of Shakespeare, am I only asking about Shakespeare's dramas, or am I also asking about his comedies and his poems, right? Am I asking about all of the aspects? Criterion validity would be For example, if I already have a decent measurement of something and I'm trying to create a new measurement instrument, I could look at the old one and say, okay, well, if the old one is measuring correctly, then your score on the old one should connect somehow to your score on the new one. So, for example, if I thought that the SAT was a good measure of your readiness to go to college, which, for the record, I don't, but if I thought that, and if the ACT is also a good measure of your readiness for college, which I also don't think, then I would expect your score on those two tests to be related, and that's you're looking at the score on one as compared to another criterion, which is where this name comes from. Face validity. This is actually one that you and I can assess, even if we're not experts in the subject matter, right? I can say, this test is supposed to be a measure of my knowledge of Shakespeare, and it's asking me questions about Charles Dickens. This doesn't have face validity. It doesn't look like a good measure of what it's measuring. And construct validity is a little bit more complicated. So construct validity is something that you'll probably pretty rarely come across, but is it measuring all of the construct, all of the different elements? So if I'm looking at a test that's supposed to assess mood disorders, right? Is it actually looking at mood disorders, or is it looking at one in particular? Is it leaving some things out? So high reliability, as we discussed with the clock and the scale examples, high reliability does not necessarily mean a high level of validity. And this picture here is one that I've used for a really long time because it really works for me. So the bullseye on the left is a measurement instrument that is not reliable and not valid, right? You're just all over the place. I have no idea what the accuracy is of this measure. The middle one is a bullseye that is reliable but not valid, right? All of my answers are clustering together, but they're not in the middle. They're not a bullseye. They're not where they should be. So it's still not an accurate measure. The third one, this is what we're looking for, right? We want something that is both reliable and valid. That's what we're looking for when we look for a good measurement instrument. So measurement instruments can be found in a whole lot of different places, and you have some examples of these in the course Blackboard site. But these are the questions that you want to think about, right? Why are we measuring? What is the reason behind asking these questions? That's going to help us pick a good measurement instrument. Who is measuring? Is somebody filling out a self-report, or is somebody else looking at their behavior or asking them questions? What is the specific thing we want to measure? Are we looking at behaviors or attitudes? When are we going to measure? If you're going to ask me questions about, say, my mood, if you're trying to figure out whether I'm depressed, you probably want to ask the question on multiple days at the same time of day, so maybe like first thing in the morning. Because if you ask me one day first thing in the morning and the next day after I've had my morning caffeine, then you're going to get two completely different results from me. Where are we going to measure? Are you asking people questions in a laboratory, in their homes? Are you asking them online? And how are we going to do it, right? Are we going to give them a paper to fill out? Are we going to ask them to do something, right? So these are all the different kinds of questions that you can think about when you're picking a measurement instrument. Measurement instruments can be used in a lot of different ways, and there's different types of them. So if you're doing interpretive or qualitative research, you're going to have measurement instruments that give you answers in words for the most part, whereas positivistic or quantitative research is generally going to give you numbers. We often will use a standardized instrument so that we ask everyone a similar set of questions, which helps us make comparisons across people, but particularly in qualitative research, we don't have to do that. And measurement instruments don't have to be written, right? They can be a set of questions that I ask someone, or they can be a period of time that we observe people's behaviors. I live near the University of Connecticut, and they have a child study center, and so I've taken my kids up, and they have my kids basically watch cartoons, and then they have a measurement instrument that tracks their eyes and tracks how long they're interested in each thing and how long they're watching each thing, and that can help them figure out, with a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, how much they really understand about what's going on, or what are the things that they pay the most attention to. So there's a lot of really cool measurement instruments out there. And this TED Talk here, you won't be able to click on this link, but you have the link so that you can put it in. I love this TED Talk because it talks a little bit about how you can use measurement to figure out what's going on in the minds of babies who are too young to talk to you, which I just think is such a cool thing that we're able to do that. So I highly recommend this TED Talk as sort of a different way of thinking about measurement. And that's what we have for you today. This hopefully is a good supplement to the book and the other readings that you have. But please don't hesitate to ask questions or reach out if there's anything that you're still stuck in on measurement or you're not quite sure how to apply this to the work that's being done in class.